Very good morning. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I want to start immediately because I have a lot of pictures. And I hope that our tight time frame is enough for this presentation. Maybe I have to hurry a bit through it. If we speak about modern architecture, we have a huge variety of possibilities to discuss. And if we speak about modernism, we normally relate our discussions to a very specific time, about 100 years ago, the beginning of the 20th century. And this topic today is called Kerala Architecture and Modernity. It is not called modernism. Modernity is actually a word which relates also to the modern thinking of today. But modernism or modernity is actually the wrong word because people always want to be modern. People at all times wanted to be modern. Always the people who are in advance of society, we can say, want to be modern. They think they are modern. So maybe we should talk about purism. That would be the better word to specify this specific period. And I would like to get the first picture. The Japanese photographer Sugimoto shows us one of the iconic buildings of modernism by Le Corbusier, the famous Villa Savoye near Paris. And he shows us the building in a very hazy way. So what does it mean? Is modernism a far distant period, chapter of architecture which we remember only, fading away as the picture shows? Or is it something which is alive? And the question comes, how can this modernism, which is also called classic, how can this modernism be made alive today? The next one, please. So I want to show you today that modernism in the world is very much alive and should be alive also in Kerala or India in general, because India has a modern tradition, and I want to show a few pictures of that, going back into history a little bit further for a very short moment. And please show the next one. What made modernism so important? It is a very abstract architecture, and that makes it also difficult to comprehend and to give interpretations about it. I want to go back to the time when this abstraction happened, actually in the art world. And it was the second half of the 19th century, when a painter like Claude Monet started to paint not the object itself as it is, in his case nature, but as he saw it, as he interpreted it. And we see, for example, here a row of trees which can still be understood as of trees alongside a river. Let's go to the next one. I just want to illustrate very briefly, I hope you can get the idea about how abstraction started at that time. Claude Monet's later buildings are, as you can see here, just color planes, color fields. And what irritates us is the mirroring of the nature above. We see the mirror image of the nature above in the river. So that makes the picture somehow alien to the original natural view. The picture itself becomes the object as a composition of color fields. The next one. Monet's later stage was a pure composition of color fields beyond the object. Even if this is called water lilies and we can see maybe the water with some flowers, we see more the pure color composition. The composition itself becomes the object. He went away from the original view. The next one. Another French artist, Georges Braque, painted this painting around 1900. And what we can see is assembled houses, maybe a village, but it looks more like a rock formation. The houses merge into each other. They merge into each other as single objects, melted into each other. And there are no details, no doors, windows. Maybe we can see one window in the center. But everything disappears. The house itself dissolves into the mass. And this painting caused a new era in arts and architecture called Cubism. So purism on the one hand and Cubism on the other gave us a high abstract perception or ability to perceive the world new. And these painters are or were very important in this development. So we are coming closer now to architecture, the next one. These were the houses which were normally built around that time. So these were houses fully decorated, lots of historical memories. It could be a house anywhere in the world, maybe even in India. Let us say around 1900 to 1920, these houses were quite common. The next one, please. And then Le Corbusier came with his first building in Vaucresson near Paris, and what was called purism was built for the first time as the first so-called modernist house, which was not called at that time modernist, of course. And what do we see? In stark contradiction to the house we have seen before, we see just a cube, a plain surface, and carefully arranged windows. We see symmetry, we see asymmetry, and we see just a separation of the cube into two by a vertical, a glass strip. This house is hardly known. It is not taught at the colleges. And I'm showing that for that reason, because it is very fundamental. It was the first really purist house at the time from 1922. The next one. Purism, Cubism, called at that time, became very fashionable. It became widespread and later called the international style. It was built everywhere, and critics say it has become too international, and it did not consider the regional or local conditions. But I want to show you later with some examples of my own work that we can really include local aspects into modernism. This, as you can read it on the left side, is the famous Bauhaus, one of the very rare moments in history, you can say, where a bundled energy created by artists developed something extraordinary. Something extraordinary in life, something extraordinary in social aspects, in design, in architecture, in craftsmanship. Walter Gropius, who had this great idea after World War I to start a vision, to start a new world, to get the chance to create something new for a better world, because he had this horrible impression in his mind as a fighting soldier. And he designed this building together with his partner Adolf Meyer. And to us, it is quite ordinary today. At the time, you have to imagine at 1925, the picture is from 1926. It was revolutionary, it was shocking. The people opposed it. The people said, no, we don't want that. We want our traditional architecture. And the Bauhaus was a very crazy school in the public opinion. It was not fully accepted. It was something which the people who lived in that village or in the town did not accept. They thought they are all crazy. And even until today, if we look at Bauhaus objects, paintings and weavings, there was also a weaver's department, they are still modern, as we call it modern today. And the objects are still built and used today. The Bauhaus was only one part at the time which promoted the idea of purism and cubism. Next, please. Here are some objects, for example, a lamp designed at the Bauhaus, which is still produced. The next picture. This is a tea set with milk and sugar pot. And what you can observe in these objects, I'm showing only two of them, it is the geometry which strikes us. So I'm coming to a point which I call the timelessness of objects and architecture, which is very important to me. We are making buildings which shall last a long time, maybe 50 years, some maybe 100. So also future generations, not only us, but the children of the children should live in these buildings happily, or should use the objects happily. We can transpose this to every object we make. Geometry is one of the basic objects, and that makes the object so modern still today. Abstraction, geometry. Next. Essence of form, geometry, and a third aspect, proportion. Proportion is, and I mean classical proportion, which were already used in Greek, in Egyptian and Indian architecture for sure. In old temple architecture, you find geometry and proportion, maybe different proportions. These three aspects were very interesting to me since the end of my study time. And you have just seen the picture of Le Corbusier's Villa Savoie, an icon of modernism. At the end of my study, I asked myself, why is this building still more modern or still better than most of the buildings we see today, which are modern, called? Next one. I'm continuing my very brief view into history. In the 1960s, modernism was rediscovered by a New York group in America called the New York Five. And one person was Richard Meyer, who designed one of the great modern buildings of that time. So modernism was rediscovered as a valuable contribution to humankind by these architects at the time. The next. I'm just showing one more building. It is not mine. It is a building designed by a Spanish architect, Fran Silvestre, in Spain, but he studied under Álvaro Siza, the great man from Portugal. And what he is doing, this is a building from the 90s or early 2000s, I'm not sure about it. And what we see here is, it is the attempt to deal with these three aspects which I just mentioned: essence of form, geometry, and I'm sure also proportion. I have not asked him about the proportional use, but I'm quite sure he is also using proportions, classic proportions, in his work, as Álvaro Siza does. What we see, an object in stark contrast to nature. So he does not want to merge it with nature, he wants to be in stark contrast. And that is what I think is correct. We should not imitate nature. We should not imitate nature. We should not try to make organic structures and say, I want to be nature. This is the worst thing we can do. It always fails. It is better to be honest in your contrast to nature. Everything what we do as human beings is not natural. We have to be aware of that. What we produce is an artificial object. And if we enhance it, it makes the object better. It's my opinion. The next one. At a talk in Mumbai a few years back, I invented this term when everybody was talking about sustainability of material, sustainability of energies, and I thought, my God, why is nobody talking about sustainability of form? And that is included in that what I'm telling today. To sustain the form you are creating, not just for a year or two, as in the fashion industry, but for a long time. For a long time, sustainability of form. We look at architecture in many, many fashionable ways. Architects create crazy things, decorative patterns, but I think that is wrong. We should work on something which lasts long. The next one. I'm coming to India now to relate the early modernism to a phase which was called Art Deco. This is an example from the famous Art Deco district in Mumbai, which recently got the UNESCO World Heritage status, and I'm very happy about that. Even though it was created mainly by the British, it is worth keeping it in its full extent. It is a big district in Mumbai which has wonderful buildings, and you can see one of them here which bears some memories of the classic modern buildings earlier. A white appearance, a block-type structure, but we see some curvy linear forms on the roof, on the edge, on the balconies, on the rain shades. So this architecture, starting in the 1930s, to decorate the puristic shapes, is still, I would say, one of the most valuable architectural times and objects, buildings, we have here in India. And they should all be preserved as a heritage, similar to older buildings from the last century or before. The next. Another building in Mumbai is this one, and you can see how decorative patterns in a geometrical manner, that is the interesting point, everything is geometry, occur, half-circular rain shades and half-circular entrance form at the corner of the building. The next one. We are coming to Cochin now, and I just want to show with two pictures that we have this heritage also in Kerala. In many cities in Kerala, we have the heritage of this very important modernist phase. One house in Matancherry, where you can see a decorative pattern around a very simple building, the puristic idea of a block in symmetry, so a classical concept, wrapped around by highly decorative patterns which are wonderful to see because they are steel rods surrounded by cement. A craftsmanship I don't know if the masons of today still do. I'm not sure about. The next one. Another building in Fort Cochin, which I had the pleasure to renovate, is from a bit later period, but it bears the same elements, a very simple cubic shape, a puristic form, added on by a curvilinear loggia, a balcony at the front, and these expressive steps and roof. So we have this also here in Kerala. I just want to emphasize that, because when I'm talking about my buildings, I'm always getting the question, why are you not building traditional? We have a Kerala tradition. And the people who talk about tradition mean the Dutch and the Portuguese tradition. Is that Kerala tradition? I don't think so. It is now a part of the Kerala tradition, but what I believe is that we have the same way a modern tradition like these buildings. The next one. I'm coming to the late phase of Indian modern architecture, and you see Le Corbusier himself, the master, maybe greeting the Indian flag in front of his first building, which was realized in Chandigarh, the High Court building. And I just want to mention one aspect. I could talk about every photo you see for half an hour or 1 hour, but I have to shorten it very specifically. It is an architecture of periphery. The periphery of the building comes into our mind if we look at the grandmasters of the second half of the century, the grandmasters' works. And fortunately enough, you in India have the two greatest masters, to my opinion, here collected in Ahmedabad and Chandigarh. The next one. The second is, of course, Louis Kahn. I made an extensive research on. That is why I sit here today. Many years ago, I studied his work, and in particular, the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. I want to mention only one aspect. It is what you see here, the periphery of the building. Abstract shapes again. Kahn remains in the brick surface, but what he did not calculate was that the brick in India, or especially at that time in Gujarat, and I must say still today in Kerala too, is very weak. It is a very soft material. It is a very soft material. I was not brave enough yet to make an exposed brick building. I would love to. But the weakness of the brick is challenging. And when I was there in 1990, 15 years after the building was completed, the surface of the brick splattered. It eroded from the heavy sunlight and, of course, of the rain. So he underestimated the possibility of the brick to bear this harsh climate there. In the meantime, the building was also struck by an earthquake in 2001. That was a big disaster. And in parts, it is not originally reconstructed, I have to mention, which is a shame. Let us talk about the periphery, and what you see is, what is Kahn doing here? He's punching holes into the big volumes. He surrounds the buildings with corridors, which are kind of balcony or rain shade. He surrounds the building with corridors and punches big holes in it. So the dramatic effect comes that we see these dark black holes in a plane surface of a cube. So periphery of the building is what we have to look at to react to the harshness of the climate in different parts of India, not only in Kerala. The next one. One of the great Indian architects, I would call him the greatest, Charles Correa, has created this building in Mumbai, we all know. And again, I consider it the most beautiful high-rise in the world. I think it is an extraordinary beautiful building. It could be a Bauhaus exercise by students. What did he do? He thinks about the periphery of the building to react to the climate. He creates loggias, balconies, and different variations of the levels going into the depth. As if the building is bleeding, it is showing its inside. He colors the cutouts. A very dramatic but very simple way of reacting to this climate. Next one. In two of my books, I explored the work of these great masters up to a certain extent, but it was related to one specific aspect, the aspect of geometry. And I was the first who explored the geometry of Louis Kahn's work. And you see a small diagram on the book cover in the left. I was trying to find out how does Kahn use geometry and proportions to reach the aspect of a sustainable form, of a timeless form. That was a very interesting aspect for me to think of. And I was working on Le Corbusier's work since my study times, and the book explored also the geometry in his work, especially also on his Indian buildings. Next one. I'm coming to present my own work here in Kerala from the last 20 years. And what we see is the area in Nettur. Nettur is a suburb of Cochin, right at the backwaters. And I made two houses there in the beginning where I tried to implement what I learned from these great masters into my own work. And we will look at the left building first, please. So what do we see here in this relatively small building, a two-story building, a very pure, simple shape, a cube without holes because the house stands at a public passage. So the Panchayat did not allow windows. So I had to carve out a court, an entrance court, and I planted a tree inside. Onto this entrance court, I could make windows, of course, so you can see the rain shades. And on the left side, I put a cylindrical staircase because it was the end of the walkway and the end of a development of several other buildings. Next one. I just want to show very briefly what I think how geometry can be implemented as one aspect of this timeless approach to architecture. This is the classical proportion of root 2. Excuse me, do you have a laser pointer, something like that? Is a laser pointer available? So it means the proportion is the outer line. Thank you very much. Yes. Oh, we can hardly see it. We can hardly see it. Unfortunately, the picture is distorted, so you don't see the real proportion behind it. But it is the outer frame. It is the outer frame of the building. 1 into root 2. I don't want to explain in detail because this would be a separate lecture, or several. And, oh yes, so this is the outline. This is the proportion 1 into root 2. And exactly in the center is the separating line where this entrance court starts. This is only a very simple graphic. The next one. The front side towards the backwaters is open. I tried to open it in contrast to the very closed entrance elevation, and that has become some of my almost permanent ideas behind the design, to close the entrance side and to open it to an attractive location, whatever it is. And you can see that I reacted to the river in a different way. I created several layers to show that we have to react at the periphery of the building. The periphery, the space between inside and outside, is the interesting space we have to think about intensely. What I observe at Indian colleges is that exactly that is missing. The education in Kerala does not focus really on the climate. But this is a different matter. So for example, the public part here is more open with a projected bigger balcony. The working area is closed and more intimate. The bedrooms in the ground floor are open towards the backwaters with their own balconies. Next one, please. Maybe you remember the book on Louis Kahn was called The Idea of Order. So Kahn's idea of order using geometry and other aspects of proportion were quite important to me to try to implement that in my own work. And I implemented that also into the elevations, not only into the plans. And what we see here is that all elements, this is a frame, the diagonal golden section frame, which connects lines which we see, but are not aware of it. We see it, but we are not aware that this is directly, that this is a golden ratio. On the other hand, there are several relationships in the other direction which form squares. If you connect this edge with this edge, you will see there is a square. There are many relations like that if you are starting an ordering system in your work to develop this kind of order in elevations or plan. Next one. The next picture. Yeah, the building is at the waterfront with a small pavilion on the left side to welcome guests by boat. The next one. The other house we saw in Nettur is located on a very narrow, long strip of land towards the backwaters. So I separated the different areas for different functional needs. For example, the car movement I did not want to bring to the house. The house near the backwaters, that was, of course, the most important element. So if we move the cars, we would have to pave everything. I didn't want that. And the owner agreed to the idea. We separate the car porch from the house, and even in the rain, he can be happy to walk with an umbrella on this beautiful walkway towards the house. And he still loves it. The next one. So how do we go ahead if we want to implement geometry into our design? What we do as architects, everybody will agree, we are sketching first, and that is what I'm still doing, of course. Before I start to rationalize my plan with proportions or whatever, I'm sketching. So I have to react to the waterfront here, maybe with a terrace, a balcony or something, an entrance on the other side. We have to have a staircase near the entrance, if possible, the kitchen following the vast to northeast corner, and the living area, maybe a bedroom near the terrace towards the water. After arranging basic functional needs, we can start to think about bringing it into that order I was talking about. The next one. Let us assume we are starting with a square. This is our basic idea on the property related to the site. Next one. No, this is too fast. Please go back. Yes. If we think of a terrace in the front, an entrance area on the other side, and an extension on the right side for a second kitchen entrance, we can divide that square in the center horizontally and add two golden rectangles. These are two golden rectangles overlapping the square. The next one. Then we need the kitchen to be positioned, and we can divide it in the golden ratio, and we are getting this line. We are getting a possible kitchen and work area. Next one. If we want the living room also in the golden proportion, we will find a line on the left side which separates this, and we can add a staircase maybe in the same proportion. Next one. We are adding bathrooms, one public, one private, related to this bedroom. We have our living room. We have the kitchen work area, a second entrance for the kitchen, a two-story entrance hall, and the staircase. The next one. So this is the final plan, basically, according to the functional arrangements in the beginning, according to the order which I wanted to create, and that you can extend even to elevations. The next, please. And now we are coming to the aspect of how to react specifically to the Indian climate in Kerala. I mentioned several aspects already, and I'm showing this as a protection on the periphery, a loggia with sun and rain shades, an air ventilation which should go through the house, a cross ventilation permanently, a 24-hour air circulation should be there in the house to avoid the fungus smell, and if possible, a second roof on top of the house which protects the house under against the heat to create a wonderful family room, a gathering room, especially if you have a beautiful location facing the backwaters. So these are the basic elements everybody knows, but how to execute these things properly according to the needs is the most important point. You see here on the waterfront, I made huge balconies because the house is open up to the lintel level, glazed, so we have to project huge balconies which function also as rain shades at the same time. The next one. Huge balconies give the elevations, and I have to tell, there is no decorative pattern used. There is no unnecessarily added on elements. Everything is functionally necessary and comes out of the function. And I find this very honest and very, very truthful. And I would add also timeless. The next one. This is the roof terrace. The next. This would be the view. So it is wonderful to create a space. And as you know, this roof is concrete. Of course, it is an expensive matter in comparison to that what we normally see in many houses here in Kerala, where the people put sheets on top of their houses as a second protection layer, which is definitely not that what we should do. Here, in this case, the umbrella protects the house. I got the chance, only few clients are willing to do that, I got the chance to integrate this umbrella into the house as a permanent structure. The next one. This house is not at the waterfront. It is in a colony in Kakanad. On the left and right side, there are two-story houses, so the dimension of the house should be similar. That was the idea, first of all. But it has also a certain canopy in parts on the roof. What happens here? We are seeing a strip of windows, and this is really a continuing room, except a certain separation in the center, which we will see. Only two design elements are used, the projection outside as a box rain shade, and the punching of holes into the volume in contrast, nothing else. That is it. What I observe in many architects' houses is they overload the designs on their elevations. They overload them with many colors, many different forms and shapes. What I'm trying is to come back to the purism we have seen from the 1920s, because it is timeless. The box range shade is not a formal thing. I don't know if any of you who design range shades and elements of the periphery of a house have observed that. The bottom range shade protects the rooms above against the moisture and the dust which comes from below. That is always forgotten. We don't have only rain and sun from the top. In the rainy season, the earth is giving moisture and dust also from the ground. Next one. The backside of that house, and you see it has a partial coverage on top, used for drying clothes, and a garden in the backside, the next one. The garden was created between the son's house and father's house, which is right behind. And you see, I opened the ground floor living, dining, kitchen area, which is all together, towards a garden. The people had to be convinced, is it really necessary to open this space so widely? But when it was realized, the next one, please, they fully agreed, because after creating this garden, the next picture, after creating this garden, they realized the living room extends to the boundary wall. The space suddenly appears much bigger. The next one. So here you see kitchen. The kitchen is actually behind me, the dining area, living, and it is connected also to the main entrance lounge. The next. The top floor has, towards the front, a continuous room separated by these two walls, a work area, a sitting area in the center, and a media area, and the possibility to sleep on a convertible bed. Next one. This house at the waterfront in the Aleppi district has an extreme opening towards the backwaters because of this wonderful location. The next. I also closed the entrance side almost completely. It is a plain wall. Only one box is projecting outside, and it is a bay window. That is all. And the main entrance, the entrance under a big roof where the main entrance is indicated. You can see the backwaters on the other side. The next one. People are afraid to make these blank walls here in Kerala. I always get the questions about moisture, about fungus. But today we are technically able to solve that. Also, the more you apply to an elevation, the more problems you will get, also with different reactions of nature. Next one. So this is the waterfront side of the house. And you see that the balcony is not only a balcony towards this beautiful view, but it is at the same time the rain shade, a used rain shade. And this is the theme which I'm working on constantly. The next one. Yeah, another example where rain shades are used as balconies. A big car porch is used in the front of the building. The next one. Another house with a similar idea where the rain shade becomes a balcony for the top floor, and at the same time a protection in the ground floor, an integrated carport which we had seen earlier, the next one. And another example where you can see the pure cubic form is a composition which integrates a carport, a sit-out, and the bedrooms which are articulated and on three different equal sides in slightly different dimensions through deep balconies to protect the room against the rain and sun. What we can see here is a vertical element in all rooms. Here again, here in the bigger room, this is the living dining area. A bedroom has one and the door where permanent air pass is possible. It is protected by horizontal bars and has a mosquito net, a shutter outside, which you can close if you don't want the air to pass. So these are the main aspects of my work to react to the periphery of a house. This is actually the basic thinking I'm trying to develop similarly in many different tasks. The next. In the end of my presentation, I want to show you that I'm also working with slope roofs if the client really insists on that. This project is under construction at the moment in Palakkad, and it shows that I tried to give the house also a very abstract, very simple slope roof, which is the pyramid. The pyramid which forms the main shape, the shelter shape, with a loggia all around, a typical Kerala element. So you can say it is related more to the Kerala tradition, but in fact it is not more related because the abstraction of the object is still there. In contrast to this pyramid, we have water tanks and we have two cubic elements which are balconies, and here is a small office with a balcony inside. The next. And you can see that purism even can be combined with the slope roof. And again, I have to ask the people who call me and ask me I shall build more in the Portuguese or Dutch style, which they call Kerala tradition, build houses with these slope roofs. But when I ask them, do you live with these slope roofs? Do you live with it? Do you see the slope roof, the different height, the sloping roof inside your building? Normally they say, no, we are making a false ceiling. So then, for what purpose do we build a slope roof if we don't use it? This house, next please, shows the slope roof inside. You really see the shelter of the slope roof, and you see the disturbance. Geometric elements, for example, the bathroom is projecting outside. This terrace is projecting outside. The water tank walls are protecting a view into the master bedroom from that side, or into the terrace or the veranda. Next one. And the living room is very open. Living, kitchen, and dining are all together in the ground floor and are open to two sides of the terrace. Next one. This is the plan entrance, and you can see a huge hall with living, dining, and the kitchen all together, and a gallery on top. This is the bedroom wing, the bathroom, an existing water well here, and a loggia all around here, some clothes drying space, and storeroom, and a second bathroom. Next. So we see the roof if we build slope roofs, we should see them. We should live with it. We should not make false ceiling under. That is contradictory. That I can't accept. Next. So the top is a gallery. It is not covering the whole. We can look down. Here are these two boxes which project outside. TV corner, reading area, family gathering. Next one. So I'm coming to my last project today, a project in Kumbalangi near Cochin, which is an elders' home by St. Teresa's order, an elders' home more in the sense of a caring station. And I had to find a concept around an existing old building here where the nuns live or have lived too. And it is a simple L-shaped building with a chapel at the end, a dining area projecting outside. Next one. And I decided to bring a curved wall into this chapel because the dome we see in many churches, or a cone shape or whatever, to go closer to heaven, is actually not the only answer to feel the expansion of the universe. If you look towards the altar, you sit here inside, you look towards the altar, and you see the expansion of space in a curved wall lit by a top light, is maybe even more impressive. Let us hope that you can visit the chapel soon. It is under construction. The whole building is almost finished in its raw structure, and I'm very happy with the space of the chapel. If you want, I can show a small 3 minutes movie from that. Do we have the time for that? Can you show that little movie about this project?
Now it's time for the question and answer session.
An L-shaped building with several rooms, double rooms, and office here, the chapel around the existing one, the dining hall, I explained it. I brought colored glasses into the corridors because the godly fire should be felt also when you walk through the corridors. Staircases going up but are not public. There are accesses to maintain the roofs. We have a kitchen here in the ground floor. And the rooms of the patients or the people who live in this arrangement. A water tank attached to the staircase. Colored glasses, vertically air pass slits with mosquito nets, because this is the west direction. My student Nidin, I don't know if he's present today, has made this movie under my guidance, and he has made that very good. This is the kitchen area, and here on top there is a huge hall, which is a hall for empowering women's work. So the sisters try to empower women in their work, whatever work it will be, a vertical slit for the staircase, and a box range shade. The monumental wall on the side of the entrance side with Saint Teresa's sculpture and a cross. The access between old and new for ambulance, for cars, a ramp, air pass, 24 hours protected by mosquito nets. The dining hall open to the court. Yeah, of course, of course. I hope there will be enough money to make the gardening as proposed and the main entrance. Thank you very much.